Hi there, everybody. Welcome to our October webinar for you, which is about end of year fundraising. It's Derek Feldman. I'm the president of Achieve, and I'm excited to be with you today. It's just me today talking with you about end of year fundraising. We originally had this scheduled for later in the year, and as we were reviewing some of our webinar programming, we thought this kind of is funny that we'll have it in November when it really should be underway starting even earlier than where we are talking about it today. So we moved things around a little bit and made sure that anybody that could join us today could. And so we're excited that we'll have a lot of guests with us talking about end of year fundraising. This will be recorded presentations you can all have. So take some notes, but know that you'll get everything here later on, including the audio recording of this session too as well. We'll have some polls. I even launched one a little bit ago. I'm going to relaunch it in a second that we'll have throughout the time too as well. So we'll love to get your input in this. And our goal here is to end a lot of the content today, roughly around 20 till 1, and then a chance from about that time till the end or all the way up to the hour with any questions that you may have. So feel free to put the questions into the GoToWebinar control panel that you see on your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can during that time, that segment, the last 20 minutes. And of course, if there is something that you want to make sure I cover, that's always helpful too. And you can put that in there or send me a message directly too as well. Again, thanks for your time today. Looking forward to our wonderful discussion about end of year fundraising. This is the time of year that we're all gearing up for a lot of different things that are coming down. So we've got Giving Tuesday for some of us. We've got our own end of year campaigns. And of course, we've got a lot of other things that we're trying to wrap up from the rest of the year and hopefully getting things ready to a point where we can try and get some of our solicitations and our donors as close to us as possible so that we become the recipient of a lot of their gifts, of course. But this is also a time that I think is a really good time to do not only end of year fundraising, but trying to connect with the people who haven't connected with us yet in a meaningful way with our cause, of course. And so as we go through today, you're going to hear about some quick things that I think you should do prior to sending the solicitations. We'll talk about some ideas. We'll talk about timing, which is really important. And then as we go through that last piece, we'll talk about some creative ideas that you might want to consider as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started and jump right in. As I mentioned, we'll talk about approach first, timing, and then creative. The first thing is around approach. It's as we look at end of year fundraising, years past, one of our only options, years past, was direct mail. And now, of course, we've got email, we've got social media, we've got phone calling, we've got all these different types of options that could be in there. Well, we actually don't look at it in those terms. We don't say to ourselves, all right, it's end of year fundraising. How are we going to do all of these things? But we look at in a much more different format in general, because what essentially that we want our individuals to do before they give by the end of the year to make the gift stronger and to increase that gift is to focus on having them learn, act, and give. It's a really important concept because as we get individual donors to go through this with us, we know that donors are going to have stronger retention, they're participating in the issue, and it's going to be a stronger relationship with you post-gift as well. So as you're looking through this model of learn, act, give, I want to highlight some things that I think you should consider, some ideas too as well. So in the first one, in the learn aspect, what do we want people to do? Well, it's around this time that you should start thinking about what is the theme and the concepts of our end of year. What is it about our cause and our issue that we not only want to ask people for money against, but we also want to teach and help people understand more about it. I'm going to show you some copy here in a little bit later, but in this area of learning, we want to take the time of right now to about mid-November and starting to educate the donor base, the prospective donor base, and our individual constituents to make sure that they understand why something about the issue that we're dealing with and or why you might starting to need support. I think that what we do and have done considerably over the years is focus so much energy on one letter at one time, trying to educate, getting them so excited, and then giving. In that, so we're essentially, if you haven't received anything prior to a direct mail, and the first time that you actually get that direct mail, you are wanting the donor to make an impulsive decision based upon reading content and say, oh my gosh, this is the thing that I want to do because the copy was so good, it pulled at my heartstrings. I'm just immediately going to make that happen. I'm not saying that doesn't happen for everybody, but the vast majority of people are exposed to concepts in and around different mediums, whether it's email or direct mail or social media. And once they're exposed to those things, we start to help them along the way learn a little bit differently about your issue or cause till we get to the action part and then getting them to the give. We have always put high expectations upon those types of methods, like a one-time direct mail, and hoping that, boy, the copy and creative was just so great and fascinating that somebody just turned it around and gave through it. And unfortunately, when you start to do it in that method, you're losing the relational connection to it, and you're pulling at a very minute segment of the potential donor base that's moved by only impulse emotion at that time. And that's what we want to try and get out. So what does learning mean? Well, quite frankly, our goal is to educate donors prior to and using creative before the solicitation. A couple things that might be really good right now to start considering doing. One is look at your communications that you're sending out right now. Instead of sending your formats of your typical newsletters and all of those things that you normally do every month, your 2-column newsletters, which you shouldn't be doing, but your newsletter content, focus it on just one concept of learning, of teaching them. So it could be as simple as, did you know facts? It could be a video highlighting and following individuals around, highlighting the beneficiaries of the people that you're interacting with right now. Photo and imagery, using different types of technology to allow you to show visual images of the people being helped this week alone and the problems they faced this week right now and why it's so relevant to what's going on. Help them understand how your issue or your cause is connected to what's in the national discussion and media as well. So think about, how do we make that connection, and also post imagery and content too. Sit down as fundraisers and marketers with your program people. Have them describe the next week of work to you. Have them write a blog about the things that those program people are going to encounter. All of those kinds of content pieces help to sort of embrace that concept of what you want people to know and see about the cause. Help them be educated. And so right around this time, you might want to also think, hey, our concepts might be around highlighting the individual that we're helping that has been dealing with a certain tragedy in their life around this time. Well, how do we start talking about that tragedy and what's happening in their life and help donors start to understand what that tragedy is and educating them along the way? Don't be afraid to test your messaging out during this time frame. We're so used to saying, well, we have to send our newsletter out in October and November. You really don't. And quite honestly, they may not be reading it anyway as we get into the holidays. If you're going to send newsletter content, send just a snippet or a visual that shows, this week we want to talk about you and the people you help, or the people of the individual that will be helped in the next 3 months. In the next 3 months, you're going to be inundated with solicitations and requests and different things. And in that time, it's sometimes easy to forget about the people that you're actually helping. And we want to start to spotlight those over the course of the next 4 weeks. So really visually use storytelling in that manner to show the individuals being helped, the beneficiary in that environment. Lead that up as you go forward. This is also a really good time for, I think, your opportunity to help bring in other people to be introduced into and in front of your donor base. What that means is, if you're going to start and use Jonathan as your beneficiary that you're going to talk about, the individual you're going to say needs your help in your solicitations, start talking about Jonathan right now. introduce Jonathan to the audience. Tell them what Jonathan has been going through before he met you. Talk about the cause and effect that's been going on, and really help them understand what the intervention your organization has provided that has elevated them to a certain level as well. So start that process now and use some valuable real estate time and your newsletter pieces to do that. It's also a great opportunity for your CEO or some other individuals within the staff of the organization to start talk openly about some of the unique things happening with the issue or cause. Again, instead of doing your monthly newsletter written content, have a video from your CEO talking about what the first 9 months of the year has been like and what we hope the next 3 months are going to happen with the issue. Use this opportunity for the CEO to send a written letter to some major donors with images as well, introducing the people that you might use in your solicitations too. These are all options that you should consider. And for those of you that have large online followings, hopefully you have started to brand some of your online managers in some of your communication. So those individuals should start to personally reach out to as well. I always find that when the CEO or staff member is the sender, introducing the beneficiary is a good option. It's much more personal, and it's a story that can be told very effectively from that CEO sort of level. So it could be something right now to say, this month in October, we want to highlight, as we are in the fall, what fall is like for the people that we're serving as well, or the people that's going through the real reasons that we exist, and start introducing that concept together. Once we start to introduce the concepts of what's happening, we want to start getting them to act. And I don't necessarily mean giving it. We've got that third. In acting, this is a time where we can help them act quickly. This is that impulse piece, right? They can help act quickly and also express things externally. Whether it's a petition, it's sharing something, or it could be as simple as giving a comment or their viewpoint. We want your audience to be in the discussion of the issue that you're about ready to ask them for money from. This is the time that we want them to externally express interest in your cause. When somebody shares something online, or somebody does something in an online environment where they're expressing a voice or an opinion, that actually has less to do with you as much as it does for the individual. It's that time for them to reinstate to themselves personally an external value and viewpoint that they want to share with the people closest to them. They want the people next to them to know this is something you care about or I care about. This is about them expressing themselves to their small audience. And that's the time that you need to take advantage of it. You can tie that into Thanksgiving very, very nicely as we get into that piece. Use that opportunity maybe in the first or second weeks of November to ask people to sign something, to give an opinion on something, to vote, to talk externally or provide a testimonial. Do something in which that the audience can potentially act upon, that they can see a short-term outcome, that you've positioned a story with that can have them doing something externally and sharing something, giving them some options. This Thanksgiving, we want to thank you and to ask you to do one more thing to thank the individuals, is share your expression or share your thankfulness to the people that are being served. I mean, all of these concepts allow the individual to act in order to internalize for themselves right before they're going to get asked the things that matter to them, that relate to your organization. So this is a prime opportunity to get them to act. Now, there's other ways that you might even be able to do this. If you've got some great special events or activities, have them share stories, have walls in which that they can express comments or feedback. Create cards of hope. We've seen that. We've had clients do that too, where they ask their donors and other people to give values of expression to the beneficiaries being served. All of these enable the individual to think and act quickly and short, succinctly in a manner that helps reinvigorate them toward the issue or cause. Make sure that they do that as much as possible. Now, that's different than learning. In learning, It's primarily educational, right? That's a one way. In the acting, we need them to reciprocate back. We need them to return back to us and express that externally in some way. And then, of course, we get them to give. And that's towards our end of year time, our time right after Thanksgiving, when we hit the solicitations pretty hard. And I know some of you will probably be asking, Derek, should we be soliciting right before Thanksgiving? And we'll get to timing in just a sec. But in terms of giving, if we do it correctly, we will have based all of our giving and solicitations back to based upon what they've learned and what they've acted upon, so that when we get into that direct mail and email solicitation creative time, it all comes together. And you might see comments that say, thank you so much, Derek. Over the last 3 months, we've been helping you understand the needs that exist, but in particular, the people that you're helping. As I've talked to you before, Jonathan is that individual. Thanks so much for helping him, creating that positive things for him to know as he goes through his struggle with cancer. And now we need your help. We need you to take the next step by becoming that donor with us. So all of these have built up to that end of year time frame, rather than looking at it as this is that we're just going to try and convince them just in that direct mail. So our concept here that we want to make sure happens is we get them to learn about things right now. This is a very important key piece. That we want them to act in some way externally. And it could be as simple as sharing something in social media. And then we want them to give, of course, towards that end of year. If you break that down even into the timing, which we'll discuss later, it works really, really good together. Right now is also a good time as you're going through this Learn, Act, Give. Start to put some stuff in front of people that you might use in your solicitations. Test that imagery that you might have. Test a statement that you might use. Sometimes when this is a really good thing you might want to consider in your newsletter, your communication. Take one sentence from your solicitation that's maybe the best quote that you might have or might use, and put it in a block. White text, black box, or some other colored kind of box there, and say, read more, and bring them to your website to read a little bit more of a story. See how many people go there. See how many people you intrigue with that sort of statement. Start testing some of that piece, that solicitation material that you're going to be sending out during the learning and acting phases. Very, very key. Why wait? Why expect that direct mail is just going to be a winner, or expect that it's just going to happen that way? So bring in aspects of your messaging. Test different statements. You can do this simply by putting into your constant contact, your exact target, whatever system you use. Test different statements, quotes, images, things that you might want to consider using. Use those as visual tools or visual pieces within your existing that communication that we just talked about earlier. The other thing that's a good time frame for right now is, as you're going through that learning and acting phase, is start putting that stuff on your website and sharing in social media. Get people to vote on a picture that you think best represents the individual we're serving. Do some polling and some questioning in your social media around a statement. Do something and say, we're testing some stuff out. Which statement do you think best reflects who we are and what we do? Put that in a poll within social media. Ask some of your biggest donors to consider looking at a message that you might externally put out there. This is the best testing ground right before end of year that you should definitely consider. Okay, all of this does one thing. One is that we want to lead people to larger sets of engagement all of the time. Let's not try and have our first onboarding be the first time that they do a solicitation. That's called donor acquisition and list buying. That is not necessarily your existing list file that you have, your existing house file that you're trying to generate and lead them to this next piece. Get them, once you've acquired an email, bring them through this Learn, Act, Give model. By the way, this should be used throughout the year as part of your welcome series as you start to acquire emails, not just end of year. Looking at all those different time frames throughout the year where you can really help your individuals go through a process of learning, doing something, and then asking them for support. That should be your ongoing method. So here, our goal is, if you haven't already acquired the email, I'm assuming you got emails or contacts in some way, that we're going to get them to learn, we're going to get them to share, maybe serve or act or do something that might be a nice experience, an event, or a small gathering of some sort right before we get them to support, of course. Now let's talk about timing, which is very, very key. So everybody it's been thinking about what's the best time that we get all of our solicitations and materials and stuff out there. So when we look at multi-channel type campaigns, and multi-channel, of course, means direct mail, email, all these different channels and routes that we are going to use to try and solicit support. Well, it would be it's safe to say that we're going to, at least for most of us on this webinar today, going to do at least direct mail and email. Some of us might do some events, activities in there, and some might even have some social media aspects too as well. But when we think about timing, it's always funny because the time and approach should be based on the donor and individual going through things this time of year rather than on when we want them to be sent. It's very, very key. So why would we send a Christmas type solicitation right before Thanksgiving? That might, well, Christmas is on their mind and all these other kinds of things. The thing that you have to remember, if you are trying to convince an individual on your messaging, you are going against what's happening in their existing world, you are going to expend a lot of energy trying to move them away from what's naturally occurring. And that is really, really tough. That would be like saying, let's say, thankful for Christmas, or do something for Christmas, when on their mind right now, the week of Thanksgiving, is being thankful and Thanksgiving, of course. So what we try to do is look at what's happening in the donor's life or individual's life during this time frame, and how do we make our solicitations, our materials, our learn, act, give type communications all relevant to that individual's time frame, not towards what we think or when we would like the money, of course. What's also important here in the timing is that there are some key important pieces that we got to observe. Obviously, November and Thanksgiving there, and then December the 24th at Christmas, and then the 31st. Those are three key and pinnacle pieces in the donor's life during that time, where we got high rates of family. We have messaging outside of ourselves. It's going to be really strong. Media is obviously focusing on Thanksgiving. Media will focus dramatically upon Christmas right after that. And then we get into New Year's and holidays, shifting messaging externally in the consumer behavior, of course, that's happening right around that holiday as well. So if we know that these are pinnacle pieces, how do we want to be a part of those and be a part of that conversation that's happening, rather than trying to always create our own that might compete during a very heavy time frame of messaging that's occurring? So what I created here for you, because some people ask, well, Derek, just tell us when we should send it. And so what I did is I just created this, and this is based upon what we are sending this year. Every year it changes. It really, really does. If you haven't sent, and I assumed maybe some of you haven't done any learning things yet, and it's already October the 22nd. So what I put on here is, if you haven't sent anything yet, send something no later than November 10th. Hopefully get something out next week. Educational, informational. Maybe do something in relationship to Halloween that might be there too as well. That's always a good option. Again, relevancy towards what the donor's going through and what's happening for them. Getting people to act during that month of November leading up to Thanksgiving. And then, of course, there's a solicitation time frame too. We have, and this has been achieved in our advisement here as we've managed, and we oversee a lot of different campaigns that actually occur at the end of the year. This is the campaign schedule that we're going off of. And I know you got some questions that are coming in. I'll make sure and get to those here in a little bit. We can come back to this slide if you have certain timing questions too. But in the giving schedule here, we usually like to play with some dates. So let me tell you why some of these are occurring. A direct mail would send from your mail house or from your organization at some point in and around that 25th, right before Thanksgiving. You'll play with that holiday a little bit. Mail doesn't actually happen around that time frame, and then it kicks back in. So the goal would be is right the day after Thanksgiving, the day right before that, is depending on what kind of mail you're using, first class or nonprofit rates, that your solicitation will be right there, forthcoming right as it happens. So that is why we like to send right before Thanksgiving to get it to drop right after. And then in addition to that, looking at 3 email sends at the very least, a December 2nd, a December 17th-ish, around that time frame, around that week, and then December 31. So those three are chosen for several reasons. One is the week after, assuming that the direct mail had landed, that email send, number one, that goes out on December 2nd, would be the first time they'd be introduced to a pure solicitation that would happen. So first part of December, right at the beginning, direct mail had landed, and if you got some of that crossover, if not, right after Thanksgiving, this occurs. Then 2 weeks later, we send another email from a different vantage point. That's very important. Sending the same email in direct mail or in email send to is not advisable. So what we usually recommend is introducing the concept in December 2nd of who your creative is for your end of year, who are the families that you might be hiring, the individuals that you might be soliciting against as well. And then in that email send to, the December 17th one, this is an opportunity for you to tell that story from a different angle. So if you highlight the individual, you have their picture and everything in December 2, do it in email on December 17th that you talk about that same story from a different angle, from maybe their parents' angle or a caregiver or somebody else that might be experiencing it too. You can use the same concept and theme, just talk about it, twist the storyline a little bit differently, different points of view. And of course, December 31, we're always asked, Derek, do we continue the campaign theme at that time? The answer is no. Usually at that December 31, we make it very short and succinct, and that is give. Just give. December 31, last minute, you've got 12 hours before the end of the year. This is your chance to get this in before the end of the year, taxes, all those kinds of things. We've got one big button. The whole thing, by the way, should be clickable to one page, which is your donate page. And there, and in fact, is where you get that going. So this is what you should make sure and try to not necessarily use your creative. You can use some of that imagery, but really focus as that you've only got hours left. This is your last chance to give to the organization to support these individuals, the people, that stuff. Let's do this on December 31. So this is sort of the campaign time frame that we would recommend. Now you can send on. It doesn't have to be the 2nd. It could be 1 or 2 days in and around that. But if you look at this schedule piece, you are going to have different variances there with also Giving Tuesday in there too. But this will pretty much help you get through the content that you need to have happen with your learning, acting, and giving all together. The other thing that you should be doing, of course, is during your email to send, that second one there, removing those that have already given recently within the last 2 weeks. So all of these emails are dynamic in nature, in contacts, is that those that have already committed or already given in direct mail and an email, starting to remove those. Push them all back in, though, on December 31 and say, if there is one more chance, and you can even shift that language for those that already have given in the campaign. Let the donor know you know that. So say, Derek, you've already been so supportive of us. You recently gave. We know that. We're thankful of it. If it's the last day, if you happen to have any more the opportunity to give, here's your chance. We hope that you do that today. Please do. If you do, blah, blah, blah. But as you can see there, bring them back in. Just segment that audience out with a disclaimer that you already know they recently gave, so they don't feel like you're badgering them again for other gifts as well. All right, let's get into some creative ideas and concepts. So this is where it's really important to make sure that as we look at creative pieces, that you start to think differently about how those pieces all come together. If you're truly doing the Learn, Act, Give model, if you can get that all through, there's a couple things you'll want to make sure happens. One is that we have a focus on the individual being helped. Very, very crucial. And if you've ever heard us on any of these sessions before, we always claim one important thing, right? You are the conduit from donor to the individual to help. You are what makes the connection between the two, the beneficiary served and the donor. You are that bridge together. So you'll have to make sure that your creative and your storylines really, really show that. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about tangible gifting and talking about impact and all of that. Well, I hate to tell you that we've done a lot of tests on impact type solicitations. Those that say, the people that do this are 80 times better and all of that stuff versus emotional. And the thing that we forget is that humans who happen to be our donors, maybe you don't have human donors, I don't know, but human donors, they tend to be emotional decision makers. And because they are emotional decision makers, they're emotional givers. And when you talk about the individual, the person that you could help, the individual that you're trying to connect them, that bridge between it, you'll tend to highlight the emotion that's in the story to say, this is what it was like before and this is what it's like there. Stick with that emotion. And as you select your story or the individual that you want to use in your solicitations, the thing that's important is that you can talk about that story from many different angles. And you can use those angles to your advantage and as another reason to communicate. So it might be something like, we've been telling you about Jonathan so much over the last 2 months, but there's another side to Jonathan that you don't know, and that's his mom and dad, or that's his caregiver, or this is the school he goes to, the teacher that he interacts with. All of these people are an important part of Jonathan, and so are you, and so are we, and so help support all of those mechanisms, of course. So pull in the emotion, pull in the relational connection between all of those individuals to really make it a succinct theme and concept overall. Do provide some tangibleness in it, but don't let that be at the forefront of the emotion. Really remember that. Emotion first, tangible pieces from there. Let them emotionally understand the need, the experience that people are going through. Once they understand that emotion, then start talking about how the different aspects can help them, how money can make differences in these individuals' lives. So $10, $50, $39, all of those things can help Jonathan, can help an individual just like Jonathan. But first start with emotion, then bring it into the tangible piece in general. The other thing that you should think about too is how do we create pieces that are relational outside of just an individual? You can bring in more than one people, or you can talk about things where, do you know somebody? This is especially good if you're trying to do acquisition, where you're using certain points to try and get an acquisition, a relationship between the potential individual where you don't really have one yet, and spark that with a relational type piece. So here I'm going to show you some creative that we're actually working with right now, and we'll be sending out over the course of the next 2 to 3 months to test something. We're doing some test campaigns. And in this piece here, you'll see a couple things. I talk about families. This is a developmental disabilities organization, so they help them. They not only help the individuals, but one of the core things that we realized as we started to have conversations is that it matters as much as to the individual as it matters to the family, that there's other people affected as well. So we help families and their loved ones with a disability live, learn, and work independently. Now, we could have said in language, we could say we expand, we empower, we do all of that. But of course, just a simplistic word of live, learn, and work will go much longer, a much stronger way than all the others. So when you're developing your concept, take these 3 things. Say concept first. What's your rationale for that concept? Not really long, not really, just really short. And then third one is what's the messaging overview? And as you'll see in this messaging overview, it starts out very strong as we all. So we can all relate, right? So whether you have an individual with disabilities or not, we all do our best to care for our loved ones. So we're trying to bring in a feeling that we all care about. Gosh, you're right. As a family member, we all do. If somebody we love, we'll do whatever we can to take care of them. But when they have needs or the kind of experience, they may need somebody beyond that we can provide. And that's where the individuals can come in. So you can start to see how we're weaving that relational piece, and the individual. And then, of course, as you go through the rest of the messaging, which I don't share here, we talk about an individual and a family going through that same experience. Starting to introduce that family early on, as well as very, very key too. So I share with you too a solicitation here that does that very effectively. If you look at the top here, it says, do you remember your first job out of school? You're like, I do. Mine was a very interesting one. I think I was traveling around my first job out of school. But what that statement does at the beginning of this email, this is an email solicitation. High ask right there, $100, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But as you see here in this email solicitation, the first part is relational. Do you remember your first job out of school? Forces the email reader to think differently. Now, I could have started with, will you give? Will you support us as well? But as soon as they open the email, getting back into that. You'll also see certain things that are bolded, of course, and then one big thing that's a donate button from there. Now, always try to, and we're recommending this time, and let us know if you're seeing anything different. Email me back if you see anything different. But we are creating more and more buttons that are action items. So, support. I want to give $25 that does this. Click, and the that's the actual button too as well. So test that out a little bit with your audiences. Worth doing that. A couple of things that you'll see in this email that are very, very key to remind you if you've never been on a webinar with us where we've discussed this. One, single column, very important. Use good for mobile and scrolling. Second piece, start with your text at the top. Take that text out of an image. Very, very key. That text shows up as the first thing that they'll see, and that's the first thing that would draw them down to continue to read. So use a very strong opening statement outside of the image to bring them down forward. And then from there, obviously go into your personalization and what's happening. Here, what's very, very key is that try and maintain that relevancy to the individual that's giving or to that experience piece as much as possible through it. So things like jobs change everything, help employ people who are blind, that kind of piece. So jobs change everything, that's relationship type pieces that anybody can relate to. Now, in terms of, I gave a poll earlier, and I am going to launch this again right now. So you should be seeing this. Here's a question around emails that I get asked often. So when should we actually be sending our emails out? I'd be curious to see what you all think. There's been some recent data, and our friends at Blackbaud, who are great, had a chance to examine a lot of different email solicitations that were going out. And there was, at a time, a sense that we should try to try and get those early, and then we said we go late, and then we say middle of the day, and then we looked at the weekends, and looked at all of these different types of things. Well, here's what I can tell you now, is that as we, and it's interesting to see the shifting occurring as people are changing their answers too as well. But here's what's really, really interesting. When sometimes the email data comes out, the bandwagon tends to happen with it. So there was a moment when everybody believed the first thing that you need to do is get people to try and make sure that it happens right at the beginning of the day. Well, then everybody started doing that. And as everybody started doing that, we noticed one thing, and you're kind of seeing the results right now, by the way. This is what you all think. So it'll be interesting to tell you what the real answer is. Everybody believed if we did it at the beginning of the day, it'll be the first thing. You'll be at the first top of their inbox. So everybody starts doing it, and now we have a flooded inbox in the morning. And how many of you are just thinking, let's just get through this. Let's just move on. So because of that, we have a little bit of a lot of email volume during that time. And a lot of open rates are not necessarily as best during that time because of so much volume. And as Blackbaud was looking at some of their fundraising solicitation data, more than like 200,000 solicitations or something across many organizations, they noticed that Monday through Friday, around, ready, wait for it, around a little bit later than that 9 to 11, so around 10 to about 2 o'clock, there was a heightened open rates in the solicitation. So our recommendation is Monday through Friday, that 10 to 3 time frame would be ideal. Not necessarily at the beginning when everybody's getting mail in email, and intersperse it out. Maybe your first solicitation should be around the 11 o'clock time frame, or your 1 o'clock or 1:30 too as well. So all in all, you should definitely consider those things. But I'll tell you, early part of the morning, it didn't have as high rate of response as well. So thank you so much, and hopefully you'll be sending those at an ideal time. And let us know what you're experiencing too. So here we go with direct mail. I'm going to follow through with the story that we actually started with. And then, of course, I am a couple minutes late to your questions, and I know they're coming in, so I'm going to get to those in a second. So here we go. This is the same kind of copy and story that you saw in the email. Jobs change everything. Help employ. We started to keep that theme in. As you'll see in the first one, personalization, very, very key. Meet Adam Rodenbeck. He's our individual, and he's very, very good about. We're very good now about introducing Adam through the system. So things start to get well. And then, as you can see on the second page here, we notice that we start to have some of those donation dollars. Again, that's the same flow that I talked about in two ways, right? Emotion first, introduction, then getting into how tangible gifting can help that as well. Don't start talking about money first until we hopefully have that conversation about emotion and who these individuals are. Don't forget your PS. Make sure we all read the PS. Most individuals will scan through direct mails first, then hit the bolded highlights as they go through. So hopefully that gives you a sense of some really good direct mail pieces that help in general. All right, so we've talked through a couple things here. One is approach, and we talked about that learn, act, give model. Let's lead them. Let's help them do something, learn a little bit about what's going on with the issue prior to get them to giving. Second piece, let's get that timing down a little bit more. Use those kind of the guideposts that I gave you. If you're going to compete against, if you're going to do end of year fundraising solicitations during Thanksgiving, notice that you're going to be competing with other external marketing media messaging that's out there just about that. So let's try and kind of time things just a little bit accordingly to the donor. And then lastly, think about your creative. Test certain things throughout the learning and acting phases. Suppress some of your other big individuals out of that system if you're going to do some personal asking. Use your direct mail at certain timeframes. Get that to launch and sit while you let those emails go through there. Focus on introducing the emotion of the individual, going through simplistic language, learn, live, work. Remember those. Create the rationale for that creative that you're trying to do. Now, of course, we could get into much more specifics overall, but when we say that we're going to have an end-of-year fundraising webinar, you can only make sure and get to as many highlights as you can. But here's what I'm going to offer you. If you have any questions that we don't get to in the next 20 minutes, and make sure you get those in right now, send those to either tweet them at me or send me an email that you'll have there, and I'll try and answer them as much as possible as I can over the next 2 to 3 weeks. It'd be good to have a dialogue about that, of course. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some of your questions. As we see here, the screen is still not working. Oh no. We apologize that the screen wasn't working, but it was working on our end and recorded on our end. Let us know if you can still see the screen now as well, but you took the poll, so hopefully that works now too. But we'll make sure and get that to you as well. Again, we'll have all of the screens to you here in a second. One of the questions came in around timing, and the question I have here is, Derek, we were told a while back that sending the direct mail prior to Thanksgiving would be ideal. Can you let us know if that has changed and for what reason? Okay, there was, and I believe it was 3 years ago, a study by a direct mail house that had sent direct mail to land second week of November, like in about 2 weeks from now. And in that study, they tested 5 organizations with, I think, if I'm correct, I don't necessarily know now, but if I recall, I'm trying to see if I can find it real quick. It had about like 50 households or 100 households or something in it. And they had positive response rates, but they were bucking against, like, it was a timing thing. But so they had a positive response rates to it, and it had beat out all the rest of the solicitations, right? So when that happened, they didn't necessarily raise more money. They got money in faster. And so then everybody thought, oh, that's a good thing. But it's basically turned into another solicitation outside of end of year. It's like Giving Tuesday, per se, if you're not using it that way. So what I would say from there is, I don't necessarily think that's a trend I would go for, because when we sent a solicitation through 2 years ago that was around that time frame, and we didn't see any substantial statistical difference in the amount of dollars, but it did come in quicker. So hopefully that gets to it. The other thing is that when you're thinking about timing in and around Christmas, some people have asked, and I'm looking, there's a question around email on Christmas. What's my view on that? We have always stayed away from it, but you could test your own that week and how it falls. We have always tried to do an email solicitation the Thursday or Friday before that week, knowing that for two reasons, that they might be in a more work environment in front of their desktop, and so if they're going to give, that we would get them in there. If they were, if we did it that week, we felt some had moved and traveled and so forth. But that has been our personal preference and what we have done. And I don't know, we might look at doing a test and doing that week, but I would try and stay against that week and try and push it in and around as much as possible. All right, so the second question that I have here is, Derek, will you give us the slides? Yes, no worries. I'll make sure that happens to you. Derek, you talk a lot about visual images. Do you have any hints for us as the end of year visual image? Yes, you should be going out. If you haven't already got some of your individual beneficiaries together, that's the hardest thing, is to get approval and sit down to do a professional photo shoot. Some of you don't have the money. That's completely fine. I think we had a client last year use like an iPhone, which is very effective. A couple things: close face-up, close photo shoots of the individual's face. Faces raise money. Big pictures of large lands and lots of small people in them doesn't really do a lot on the emotion side. In terms of the actual statistics, like if you were to do infographics, that's fine, but I would still focus the letter content on the individual person, because people fund people. Statistics, if you have a lot of stats, that is not necessarily as easily consumable by a donor base that's not used to doing that way. Infographics are a very good piece to use in bits and pieces, and for certain audiences, sometimes major donors and mid-level donors and above. But when we're trying to garner support from individuals who haven't given before, sometimes the infographic pieces don't, in our experience when we did test campaigns, haven't strongly outperforms those that were based on an individual emotional face, that kind of stuff. So hopefully that makes sense for you too. The other thing that I would mention is that when you're thinking about that individual person that you're going to highlight, make sure that you get different angles and pieces of it. Usually photo shoots that happen, it's like, they come to one location and you take a couple shots of them at one location. Well, that really restricts your story as well. So if you are taking a photo of one person and they're only standing in front of the fountain, and you try to use the story from a different angle, that's going to be hard, because it's the same image. It's just they're right in front of a fountain. If you're going to if you think that you're going to shift the storyline from family or talk about their teacher in their school and a different message, have the photo shoot do that too as well. And that's a common mistake that we get from individuals that are doing some photography and doing some other things, where they'll constantly come up and say, hey, here's the creative we have, and it's one image of one person in front of one thing, and we can't really, after we tell the story or use that once, the audience tends to think, if we use that again, that we don't have much more. So try to make sure that when you're doing visual images, that you do have a suite of images that you can use. When you're doing the acting piece, always a good thing to share, to have and send to the people to act right before you do the solicitation, to ask them to, or to give them some, social media options, some imagery with text overlays. That happens and is a very nice thing that they can share. Create sample tweets for them, all of that stuff. But mix it up. You can't give that same set to them, 2 to 3 weeks later and expect them to use the same content as well. And what we have found is that after we've done some post interviews of those people who share, they like the new images. It was also reinvigorating for them to see that kind of stuff come out in general too. All right, so a couple other questions that we're getting in. One here is Derek, can you review video recommendations for us? Yes. So video is a funny one. We did a test campaign. Was it last year or the year before? We did a campaign where we had a professional video versus a non-professional video. Now, we didn't see any performance difference in the professional versus the unprofessional. However, I will say that we had more people sharing the unprofessional one with close friends. We had more of our major and mid-level donors sharing the professional stuff. So it was an interesting difference between major mid-level donors and donors that were on the lower spectrum of your donor base and what they were and how they were used. The ones that were unprofessionally done did have some professionalism applied to them in a very cheap way, like a wrapper, like a beginning logo or something at the end. We have found that if all of your solicitations have videos and everything, it still has not outperformed. If you're going to use a video, it's great. Use it once, use a different piece of it. But and then once you use it once, here's the bad thing. We haven't seen any from our standpoint. After we have gone back and look at all the campaigns that we have done or monitored in the Millennial Impact Studies and everything else, where if every solicitation had a video, if it would perform better, that didn't happen at all. And viewership didn't increase. It actually decreased a little bit. So that was from our own studies. But when they did get the option for the first time to view the video, viewership was higher as well. Terms of transaction rates. We didn't see the kind of performance in the actual email exchange there. I want to be careful how I word this, that you'll understand what we found. In the moment that the individual received the video solicitation, it didn't necessarily convince them more or less to give in that environment, in that email right there. But we did see in our post surveys and our post interviews that the video did impact their gift at some point during the end of year process. And that goes to the multi-channel piece. So they saw a video, but they might have given offline. They might have given at an event. They might have given in some different way outside of that email. But it wasn't in the process they didn't go through was watch video or got email, watched video, went to donation page, transacted. But in our post interviews and post everything else, we did see that the video had an impact on their overarching giving decisions during that time frame. So video is a good piece, but if you look at it in terms of just that solicitation, you may not get the response that you want. And that's what we have found. Others may have found differently. Okay, so the next one is on, I like this one here. Big picture question on direct mail. Should we all be investing in building this, even if our audience is to date millennial or younger, virtual connections, or email only? And the answer is yes, and here's why. So we have looked at, even in the millennial standpoint, after the individual even gives online for the first time, and you cue a direct mail at them in another solicitation, they will give through the direct mail. We used to think that everybody stays in general in the channel that they give in, but that's actually not true. After the individual gives online, the propensity to then to give through direct mail is high. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, I don't personally like direct mail. Well, that's your personal opinion, but their individual brand awareness had started in the online environment, and you stuck the brand back in front of them in an offline environment. It doesn't mean they're ignoring it. They're going to ignore it and say, oh, I'm only going to give in an email. And millennials have reacted to direct mail, not as high rates as boomers, of course, but they have reacted. So what I would do is I would do a two-part test with your audience. I would do a postcard send to your donors that gave online first to see if you can get those donors to give with a vanity URL, meaning that it would be a URL you only use in that postcard to get them to go to a page. And then the second thing that then you'll be able to track who actually used that link and whether you could pool them to direct mail offline to an online. Then I would do a direct mail at them, a one-time send, and see if you get that reflect that same research response rate that we are getting as well. Basically, what we're saying is that the direct mail and the email coincide together, and the direct mail also reminds them to give in the email environment as well. So right now, we're still living in a much more multi-channel world that ignoring the direct mail, you will actually be challenged in that. Now, here's a funny thing is that we have like 5 millennial big organizations that we follow regularly, and they are research partners of ours. They'll raise more than 5 million from millennials in a year, and they use direct mail. Almost all of them use direct mail, either at lower levels or at millennials who give at higher levels and above. And some of them choose some of their first entry point of those gifting tends to be in the online environment. So hopefully that helps to kind of get there. So all of you have told us that you had it stuck. And so I apologize. I'll send the presentation out. It was the best, beautifully designed presentation in the world. So you're going to love it. No, I'm just joking. But we'll make sure and get it out to you. I apologize for that. On our end, it looks like it all came through. And so on the recording, it should be okay. But we'll make sure and send those to you too as well. I thank you for your patience during that time. Again, you got any questions, feel free to tweet or send me an email. I wish you the best for the end of year and look forward to hearing your success. If anything happened that was unique or that you think our audience would love to hear about and some examples, please do share with us. We've got a great audience of research and others that are interested in learning from you as well. Take care. Wish you the best. Bye-bye.